Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. I'm back from Mexico. We had an amazing time with Chessable guys, Eric Hansen, Aman Embleton, and 60 other people. More about that, I'm gonna make a special review and report with some interesting pictures and maybe even a few videos. So later about that, I just want to say I'm back. I'm once again going to produce some interesting content in terms of that, but also related with my trip to Mexico was my meeting with one of the most popular commentators of the games in the world. Um, his nickname is Stuff, and he asked me, Maya, could you please make one video for me? How should I play against the GPA, close Sicilian, and the systems? And I said, okay, I'll make a special video for you as you requested. It's going to be about how to treat with black piece um, Grand Prix attack. It's also part of playing black against Sicilian, actually against anti-Sicilian ideas and positions by white. So that's why I'd like to teach you how to play against that. I also want to tell you one thing. Even though Low Sicilian is related with this system, I'm not gonna do it now. We just need like not maybe one, but few videos. How should you play? There are like zillions of different systems that you can use against Low Sicilian. I chose an interesting one, thanks to one of my friends whose name I'm also going to mention next time and in that video. I wanna go now strictly with the GPA Grand Prix attack by white in two cases: when the bishop is on b5 and when the bishop is on c4. So let's get started. After like e4, c5, they go knight c3. One of Tuff's question was, why should we go with knight c6 rather than d6 and d stuff? First of all, you have to understand that it's a matter of your choice, preference, and definitely you can decide what do you prefer and why would you like to play rather one than another. But that's one thing. I also like to tell you that when you play knight c6, they can never fight for any d4. For example, one of his questions was, if he goes with d6, what are the problems? Some GPA variations work a little bit better there for white, such as line with f4, knight f3, bishop b5 check. Then even bishop c4 goes smoother for white. So that's why I'm of opinion that that's why all these top guys, including nowadays Carlsen, yesterday Kramnik, Kasparov, Topalov, including Fischer, they all used to play knight c6. If your question is how should you play these positions, then you should be playing knight c6. Here, I won't go too much against my butchered Sicilian material, but I'm just going to give you a piece of a great advice. If they ever play early bishop b5, what I gave in the course butchered the Sicilian, you just have to jump with the knight on d4, and you should never let them take on c. That's the point, and simply you avoid taking on c6. I mean, that white should take on c6. You avoid like breaking the pawn structure and playing position like that. So when you go with knight d4, I won't tell you what are you supposed to do afterwards, but it's already enough that I told you that you should be going with the knight d4. After f4, we have the Grand Prix attack. And when f4 happens, we now just have to know how to treat these positions regularly. So basically, when they go with f4, you just go g6, knight f3, bishop g7, and they have two options. I always taught my students the last couple of years to go with the bishop e5, simply because bishop e5 idea is very clear, obvious, and easy to follow and cope with. White threatens to take on c6 and to create double pawns. If you ever let them take to do this, you would be under huge Grand Prix attack fire, and you should never let that happen. But before that, let's just go with one very common and an old-fashioned move, bishop c4, that players used to play in the past. It's bishop c4. It was considered to be way more aggressive than positional bishop b5. And an idea is castle f5 with a pressure along the f file and the pawn on f7. You have to play 6. You simply have to go with a 6. And this now reminds me on some of those English variations and English opening lines, where when you go with a bishop on c5 reversed, they just go e3, knight g2, and d4. You absolutely do the same, just reversed with the black pieces. You go e6, knight e7, and you go d5. So let's get started. The main move is f5, and those who know the theory, they always play f5. Although quite interesting enough, on all these kinds of like medium levels, whenever I had to play against some guys who just learned something about the GPA or maybe saw some games, they always went with castle. Castle is a bit inaccurate, and you always have to be ready and immediately have to be ready to punish them. I'll show you a very easy plan. Knight g7. Your plan should be to go and kick off with d5. When you go with knight g7 and you want to go with d5, they have two options, d3 and queen e1. If queen e1 happens, you can never play now d5, because if d5, simply they would take, and they would win the pawn, because now queen on e1 threatens this queen and pins the king. So basically you can play d5. That's why you play castles. And if they play d3, you will just go with pretty much the same idea. If they play e5, you just have to break the center and threaten knight f5, even some d takes, f takes, knight d5, queen d4 check ideas. So that's why most of these guys go d3. You just go d5, bishop b3. Any takes d5 just helps you a lot, because it just open up the light square bishop, and at the same time open up the f5 square for the knight. So when they play bishop e3 castles, we have both of these possibilities. Going with the bishop on g4, pinning that knight and having better control of the center, as well as going with the knight on f5 and controlling the central square d4. So when they go with bishop e3, we just go castle. And when they go castle, absolutely the main option in theory here by white is queen e1. And all those guys who play the GPA or Grand Prix attack, they just know that they want to go with queen h4, f5, bishop h6, knight g5, and they want to mate. Every single Grand Prix player learned that he should be going with queen on h4, that he wants to go with f5, bishop h6, and knight g5. And there we go. Here actually comes to the black's reaction, and this is a time for the theme by black, and we just go with the knight d4. We just go with the knight d4. Relatively normal idea. We want to take on b3, even though that bishop doesn't look anymore that good. And at the same time, we're willing to go with some b5 ideas in some of these positions as well. Or we want to take on b3. We want to play b6, bishop e7, and with the bishop pair slowly to grind our opponent down with the bishop pair. But they take and play knight e2. And very interesting, in a Chessable camp, we had one tournament in 15 minutes, and I played against a very talented guy whose name is Nathan. And after d takes, here, after the game, one of the teachers in the camp, Lefong, approached to me and said, Maya, do you know that I exactly played the same line a few months ago and realized that we have to play a5 first? That's what I did against Nathan. You will see why is it so important to provoke this a4 by white, because you just threaten a4, trapping up the bishop. Or simply, if they play a3, a4, getting the space. For a4, you play d3, breaking. And now they do not have time to take, because you have this intermediary check And that's one of the reasons why you always have to put your king on h1 when you play f4. Nathan played knight c3. I brought my knight on c6 to jump on d4, and he simply completely blundered. It took on d3. I played queen b6 and he resigned. But the point was that if he played bishop e3 after knight e4, black absolutely has a fine game because we're about to win the bishop pair, and we should be very happy with existing position. All things considered, that's why they have to play f5 instead of short castle, and it just seems to be a little bit slow reaction by white. When they go with f5, we go knight g7. They take here. There are like two options. From theoretical point of view, my vote is not gonna go for f takes c6 because you just have to remember a lot. I remember back to the days when that variation used to be dangerous. White used to win all those games with the white pieces after f takes c6. Nowadays it's not anymore like that, but it requires like a very precise and a long-lasting theoretical knowledge. Why should you learn all that? You just play d takes c6. My recent European Championship tournament, when I went with my son, I bought two great books, and one book is chosen best games by Vasilis Mislov and Vasilis Mislov. Why do I come up with these books? Because that guy has an amazing style, positional style, and he was a very simple as a like chess player. He didn't go into the complications. His realization was fantastic. I bought it for my student, of course, but why did I come up with his name? He was the one who developed the following system with d takes c6, and I'm gonna teach you one of his plans. After d3 castles specialty comes now, h6. It prevents absolutely everything in white's game. It prevents knight g5, it prevents bishop g5, and most of all, it prevents that queen e1, queen h4 plan that is so typical for the GPA players. And I guarantee, once you go with this h6 idea, they will already be like pretty much confused. There is also one more important thing behind h6. Not only that you prevented bishop g5, knight g5, queen e1, queen h4, but at the same time, you want to allow yourself g5 followed by knight g6, getting a good outpost for the knight, controlling the dark squares, and eventually even breaking with f5 when you move your king from h8. That's what I saw from one of the games of Kramnik. And after h6, they just have to go with some stuff. In the case of a3, they want to bring it back. You play g5. They want to go knight g3, knight h5. You don't care. They go knight g3. You just jump here, harassing the light square bishop. And when they save it finally, like, oh man, you won't be able to play f5 for the rest of the game because of the weak position of the king and good bishop here. Boom, king h7, and f5 comes unstoppable. The thing is, any knight h5, you have bishop h8. Any bishop d2, you just have f5 with e takes f5. That's what I remember from Kramnik's simul game. He killed somebody exactly in the same. Another thing is that after h6, they can go with king h1 either. Because then, first of all, you can, in Smyslov's fashion, chase away this light square bishop and win it. Or you can play b6, a little bit more flexible. And any time, that's like a golden rule in these positions, and it's like a standard. Whenever they go with queen e1 with a pawn on h6, you go g5. The point of h6 was to play g5 to stop queen h4, but at the same time to prevent any queen g3 followed by some sacrifices on g5, because you're just going to settle your knight on g6 after. So they go queen g3, you go knight g6, and you control everything. And that's why most of these guys anyways react with queen e1. By now you know what should be the reaction when the queen comes on e1. And on h4, I played the game like this. Very interesting game. You just play g4, knight h2. And here I played I would say, and I would call it humanoid type of move, like h5 to defend it. With absolutely fine game. After knight e2, I played knight e4, and I was better because I was threatening knight c2, and I just managed to win the game. But Way better after the game I checked was king h7, believe it or not, because we shouldn't care about the pawn, but we should care about unleashing this f5, not being under the pin by bishop on c4, and afterwards you just chase away the knight on g4. After knight h2, jump on d4, threaten knight c2. When they defend it, now even your knight from g6 comes there, and knight comes on h4, threaten b5, go with a, I don't know, open dark squares. Maybe at some point, if you get rid of the light square bishop, open g file, and so on and so on. An amazing example of reaching an initiative. Guys, I believe that should be good about the basics. How should you treat bishop c4? Let's go with the most critical bishop b5. Lately, when I taught my students to play Grand Prix attack, and even when I made a video about the Grand Prix attack, this is what I mentioned. Bishop b5. Once again, a golden standard. Please don't. I'm gonna call it blunder from now on, because you're just going to have my explanation. I insisted on this like so many times, and you should never let your opponent take on c6. Allowing them to take on c6 and create some weaknesses would be a big positional mistake of yours. You always have to jump on d4, and that's the first rule about trading the Grand Prix attack once the bishop comes on b4. Always jump on d4. After castles, another rule. Can't play knight f6. They're just going to kick my knight away. I don't want to have my knight f6. And finally, yes, I do want to play d6, but I don't know how. I'm bothered by this bishop on b5. You also have to remember one more thing. Don't ever take on b5. Taking on b5 happened in my very first Grand Prix attack game ever. Then I played a6. Then I played d6. Then I played knight f6. My opponent played queen e1 like nothing was happening. Then he played queen h4. And I said, what is he doing? I really don't understand. He just wants to come up with some attack. I played b5. He played f5. I played b4. The guy came on e2. I played very slow a5. I played bishop h6. And then I realized that I was completely lost. Absolutely the same game, just vice versa. I was white. I played against Jonathan Tayar and one more. I believe he's an older GM from United States. And I won the game, 2 games like this, but I just like you see, I had to learn it the harder way. I also lost 1 game like this. So don't take on b5. That's another rule. And after castles, just go a6. And now they have 2 options. They gotta go with the bishop on d3. Simply that's the move. And that's what everybody's going to do. I'll explain why. If bishop c4, you just make a very simple b5. And when they play bishop d5, you just make a very simple rook b8, followed by e6, knight e7, castles, and d5. You absolutely have fine game, and you absolutely don't have to worry about anything. That's why everybody brings back this bishop to d3. And not only because of that, they also bring this bishop back to d3 because once they take on d4, we should always recapture by pawn. Why should we recapture by pawn? To open c file, to pressure pawn on c2, to have like a good outpost d4, even though we block the bishop on g7. Another thing is, after they block it and they take it, they would like to go with knight e2, b3, bishop e2, queen e1, queen f2 to win that pawn. We won't give them that pleasure. So after bishop d3, we just go d6. They take. Simply, they have to. You want to play b5 with absolutely fine game for black and lots of opportunities, even bishop g4 in some lines. That's why they take in time and play knight e2. And the specialty comes now. It's knight f6. Of course, they can't take on d4 because of queen b6, and they're about to lose this knight and this king. e5 is going to be the move. And of course, they have to do either king h1 or just c3. If they do king h1, yes, they do threaten to take on d4. So first rule was don't ever let them go with bishop takes e6 and jump on d4. Second rule was don't ever take on b5 because it's a very playable and actually pleasant experience for Grand Prix players. And now the rule is once they go with a king h1 and they threaten to take, you gotta go with e5. With e5, Grand Prix attack becomes extremely dangerous for all kinds of levels. I just had like so many games where they captured an e5, played bishop c4, you can't take because f7 is scamming, but you play b5, kicking this bishop away, and just like in Tal variation of Caro positions, where you go with d3 and short castles, here you just go, where you go with e6, here you go with e3, you just break their pawn structure and keep them undeveloped thanks to your pawn d3, because look at this, then the dark square bishop and of course subsequently this rook on a1, they just suffered for the rest of the game. That's why after a5 they gotta go with c3 and you play castles. Very interesting pawn sec found in some correspondence games. Afterwards, I used it in a couple of my blitz games, won all my games very easily. The thing is, they shouldn't take. You go rook e8. I already had like few games like this. They go queen f3 to defend it. I go bishop g4, queen g3, and I go h5. And after h5, we just defend this bishop. But at the same time, we want to go after the pawn on e4. After h3, we just take. H takes, rook d4. And it's very likely that you might have a game like this after g takes h5, an unbelievably strong move that wins the game on the spot, rook to d5. And you want to go here, you want to give check, and they're fallen up. What a nice line. It's also what makes this line so nice is that it's kind of forcing. It's very logical. Once again, I'd say it's a very human type of variation because of all those human moves. And it's really working in practice fantastic for black. Finally, those who wouldn't take, but they play bishop c2, just complete development with d3, you just say, not this time, babe. Not this time, definitely, because I'll do this fork to knight and the bishop. You gotta take. And now I'll go rook e8. And now once again, for the time being, I'm gonna keep both of these pieces. I'm talking about the bishop on c1 and rook on a1. I'm gonna keep them closed. So when they go with knight g3, do you know old good positional rule? When the knights are on g3, kick them away with h5, h4. When the knight is on b3, do it with a5 and a4. The same we can apply with the knights on g6 and b6. So h5 with the idea of h4, practically engine move is f5, but you play h4, and after 92, they used to play 94, d5, b5, but here I come up with a fantastic novelty, h3 to break the king, take it there, play b5, and absolutely kill this king and the pawn on e4, thanks to an amazing control of the light square. Same approach. If they do knight c3, you just play b5 to go with b4 to weaken e4. They gotta do a3. You play here and you play rook c8. Yes, we're down a pawn, but we're happy. We're happy because after we break in the center with d5, we open up the game. We got a better development, and they have problems. Problems on the diagonal, on g2, on c2. They have problems all over the board. If e5, you just go with this amazing move d4, and position looks really, really great for you. Finally, those who instantly go with c3, they don't even allow us to play e5. We gotta take, and they have two options. More common in practice is d takes c3. Although in blitz, people tend to take by b pawn. By old good rule, let me just put the bishop back and build up a center. After a castle, bishop c2, b5, d4, bishop b7, knight g3, you go rook c8. Hui Fan, strongest woman in the world, a couple of time woman champion, played like this. She went after the pawn on c3 also simultaneously. She's just weakening the pawn on e4 afterwards. And also one of my students, Devan Shi from Canada, be the master right now, he played a game in the World Championship under 14 like this, and preparing this for you, I just found his game, and even here played queen b6 followed by b4. But I analyzed it a little bit, and b4 breaks even faster. Black looks amazing, threatens both b4 and d4, and this really looks great. Finally, if d takes c3, you should be going with the same castles, king h1, b5. An idea is to go with the bishop on b7 and to pressure pawn on e4. I like it. I enjoy these positions. They gotta go either with knight e4 or knight g3. If they go knight g3, you just play bishop b7, f5. They want to do attack. All you have to remember is just a nice maneuver once they weaken the e5 square, knight d7. This maneuver absolutely killed their attacking hopes and chances. Why? You'll bring your knight on e5. First of all, this is kind of restricted knight. Second thing, this light square bishop doesn't do anything that's special and it's pretty limited. Only good piece is bishop on g5, but altogether with a pawn on f5, it can't do much in this case. So you just go with a5. You want to break with b4, and that's how we played these positions with really nice and promising games for black. In the case of knight d4, you just go e5. That's an important move and the setup to remember. And when they take, you take. They have knight b3 and knight f3. If knight f3, you play bishop e7. Queen d6. I already found a few games. You defend pawn on e5 and want to double up on the d file. Black looks easily better. In the case of knight b3, bishop g4, found like few correspondence games like this with a relatively good game, an easy game for black. Queen goes on d6, finally find its shelter on e7, and then when they play some queen f2 to either threaten bishop g5 or control c5, you just defend both. You just defend both. They cannot go anymore with the knight c5. They cannot go anymore with the bishop g5. You absolutely have fine game. And with these rooks on c8 and a8, using some sort of minority attack afterwards with b4 at some point with a5, black could look really good. Hope that you enjoy this. Thanks, Toff, for requesting and asking for this one. And I'm pretty sure that this lecture is going to solve lots of problems. Once again, for the end of the lesson, first golden rule: don't ever let them take on c6 when they play bishop b5. Second rule, when they play bishop b5 and you jump on d4 already, don't ever go after that bishop on b5. It's not good to take it. And finally, afterwards, when they take on d4, take by c pawn, because you want to have an open c file and you want to have pressure along that file. Thank you so much for watching and hope that you enjoyed this lecture.